Behold another episode of the Gaming Memories podcast where I, your host, the Prophet, he who hath been anointed by the gaming gods themselves, even Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost, who appeared to me in vision, commanding I create the one true gaming podcast by interviewing creative and interesting people about their favorite gaming memories growing up. So without further ado, let me introduce today's thrice returning guest. Check. Activate movie voice. Welcome, listeners, to another electrifying episode of Gaming Memories. Today, we've got a truly tantalizing treat for you. Joining us is none other than the marvelous music maestro, Headphone Activist. Here to harmonize with us about his terrific and terrifying journey as an avid Tarkov player. Brace yourselves as we delve into the dicey drama surrounding Escape from Tarkov, the enigmatic hardcore military shooter that's currently capturing headlines. From controversial content to community clashes, we'll cover it all with our guest, who will provide his unique perspective on the pandemonium. I love the movie voice. Headphone Activist is, long story short, a very well-established musician. Millions and millions of streams all across the world. He does what every musician wishes they could do and works and lives full-time off of his music. That puts him in the top like 0.0000000000000000001% of producers. I'm always really grateful that he takes the time to come on the podcast. You can check him out on previous episodes if you want to get into the dirty details of all his gaming memories. But this episode, we talk specifically about Tarkov and its recent controversy, which centers on the introduction of the, quote, Unheard Edition, a $250 package that includes exclusive content such as an offline co-op PvE mode. However, this sparked outrage amongst the community, particularly among the owners of the previous Edge of Darkness EOD edition, who were previously promised access to all future DLCs. Battlestate Games initially justified the decision by stating that the new PvE mode was a feature and not a DLC. Trickery. Following significant backlash, they offered EOD owners a 6-month access to the PvE mode and a discounted upgrade. But this, so far, has done little to quell the discontent, with accusations of the game adopting a pay-to-win model. And Headphone Activist is a very avid Tarkov player, so he talks about being a longtime fan of the game. We talk about its implications in the greater gaming ecosystem and economy, similar games that have gone through different redemption arcs. Is it possible for Battlestate to have a redemption arc on this? He walks us through the community, the rise of the game, and why this controversy was such a big deal. Other than that, you guys know the drill. Make sure to share the good news of the gaming gospel, and ye shall be blessed. I say these things in the name of Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost. Amen, and enjoy the show. Welcome, Headphone Activist. You are, as we were just chatting, I believe this is your technically fourth appearance. I haven't edited the third one yet, so it hasn't even come out yet.
It's such a long conversation. It was so much fun. Yeah. But yeah, we'll call it four. This is the fourth one.
It'll be the fourth one, and this might actually come out. I banked that. Well, the last one was so long, I think I split it into two, and I only put the first half out like sometime last year.
Yeah.
And then I still have that second half banked. I do have, shout out to Ashton, I do have a dedicated editor now, so things are moving a little bit quicker. Maybe we'll do them back to back. I'll just put this one out and that one out, and we'll have like a double Headphone Activist.
First one with video, though, so
this is the first one with video. We can see your beautiful face. Let's do like a quick recap on who you are.
Yeah.
Your music, and then maybe your recap on some of the games we talked about and games you played growing up. And then people will know from the intro, I'll record this after, that we're going to be talking about first-person shooters and current stuff that's going on. So they'll know, but just so they have a little bit of background of who you are and your gaming background before we get into it.
Yeah, so I'm Pete. My artist name is Headphone Activist. We became friends in my time in Utah when I was living out west. And then since then, we've just stayed connected through, the awesome power of the internet. My itinerary on gaming goes back to Super Nintendo, pretty much every system going up into the the first generation Wii, then everything from PlayStation 2 and up, and a few 360s that got the red ring of death. And then I've been on PC probably for the past like 8 or 9 years now. And I play everything from shooters, MMORPGs, IRP, or used to RP, sports games, adventure games, you name it. I'll pretty much try it because I love gaming.
And what's the newest music stuff we can promo real quick? People want to check you out.
Yeah. So since the last time we talked, I signed with a couple new labels. I'm working with a company called Dreamscape. They're based over in London, just kind of out of the UK, I guess. But we're mostly doing ambient stuff with them. So the best way I could explain it is the Blade Runner soundtrack. If you can think of the music that you would hear throughout Blade Runner, specifically the stuff that Hans Zimmer scored for the second one, 2049. I'm making a bunch of stuff like that for them. And then I'm also working with this great company in Australia called Valley View, and we're doing more nature ambient. So guitars, pianos, organic instruments mixed in with 3D sound recordings of birds and water and
is this
nature.
like sync stuff, or is it coming out under the Headphone Activist label?
It's Headphone Activist, but it's going to a label that is then marketing it and also shopping it for sync. So it starts with me and the label, and then they kind of take it out into the world and find placement for it.
You're all over the place. When we chatted last, you had just, I don't know if it was done, but you sent me a SoundCloud set. I think it was close to done of a reggae group. Yeah.
So I tried that and I put a couple of those out and it was cool. Like my audience definitely received it well, which I appreciate. But the thing now is like with TikTok, it's so competitive to have music stand out when people are consuming stuff around what's trending. So, I mean, it's not any different than what it was back in the day with a radio station plugging, Jay-Z or a top 10 artist. But now it's us, it's the user and all of us collectively sending music back and forth through our reels and our TikToks that really pushes content. And dub and reggae has kind of historically been slept on, especially in like first world culture. It's just kind of taken as like a secondary thing unless you're a fan of it. But the ambient stuff, surprisingly, you would think stuff without drums wouldn't do well, but we put out, I want to say between Dreamscape, 24/7, who's another label I'm working with, and the Valley View guys, I did 30 records last year, which is roughly since the last time you and I chatted, was in that like dropping of those 30 songs. And they've generated at least 20 million streams on Spotify since the last time we talked, which is amazing. And then from that, I got a Letterkenny deal. It was my first thing to go on Hulu. I had some of my stuff featured on Hulu at the beginning of this year, I guess.
I love that show, by the way. So out of all the shows to get put on, that show is funny. It is.
Did you see the final season by chance?
No, I'm not. I'm only on like season 2 or 3.
Okay, so when you get to the final season, you'll get to hear my song.
Sweet.
In the first episode of the final season.
Hell yeah. Congrats, dude.
Thank you.
I don't know if had started. I have like a dark electronic project that I don't really talk about on the podcast that much. It's not anonymous, but it's me and my brother, and I'm not cool. I'm a 40-year-old dude with kids, right?
No, you're
it's like,
if you're not cool, then I'm not cool. So
it's
not
like
even have that conversation.
We never feature ourselves, right? It's just the music, and I do all the visuals for it. It does have drums, but I will often tell people, they're like, "What kind of music do you make?" And I'll say Blade Runner beats. So it's sort of in the same vein, it sounds like.
Well, our mutual friend Christian from X&G, he had mentioned to me that because I knew you dabbled with music, but I never got to listen to much. And he said the closest thing he can compare to your music is the artist Lauren.
Yes.
You're familiar with Lauren? And I love Lauren. So I'm excited at some point. Hopefully I can get a sneak peek at some of your tunes.
Yeah, there's some stuff out. There's some YouTubes. I'll send it your way. Lauren is definitely what happened is I discovered Lauren. I made a bunch of like video game themed hip hop. When I knew Christian, I had a different alias called Roboclip, which I do use for gaming memories because I have a bunch of bootleg video game remixes, and then I put them on my Patreon because I can't like technically release them.
Okay.
So it's like a weird middle ground. But then I discovered Lauren, and everything changed. I was like, okay, Yeah.
I need to put you on to some of the stuff that I'm releasing, but more so some of the guys on the label, because
Okay, sweet.
we all listen to Lauren pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like across the board, everybody's like Lauren's dope.
He's the
Yeah.
godfather of like that dark cinematic electronic.
So it's for me, it's like Aphex Twin and then Burial and now Lauren, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
for my discovery of those artists, it's
So
like I got into
Aphex
Aphex
Twin,
Twin.
yeah, he is like adjacent, and Burial's like more of that UK dub. But there's also someone who I didn't know, but a lot of people will credit being a predecessor to Lorne. It's a duo called Boards of Canada. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Boards of Canada's right there in the conversation as
Yeah.
well, for
So
sure.
apparently,
Yeah.
like, once I started getting into Lorne and hanging out on different, like on the Lorne Discord, I discovered Boards of Canada, which I guess sort of predate that. But all of those, I would
Also
definitely,
phenomenal. Just to
yes.
credit Boards of Canada, also phenomenal. If
Yeah.
you're listening, you've never listened to Boards of Canada, put on some Boards of Canada for the rest of the podcast.
And I hadn't thought about, but Burial does like, because I always put like garage and UK stuff almost in its like separate little bubble.
Because
But
yeah.
it is, but it's also now that you brought it up, I'm like, there's so much overlap.
What's interesting too is like Aphex Twin has so much like breakcore, IDM, and jungle in his
Yes.
records, and traditional techno and dark dance. But then he has the Ambient Work series, which is like two full albums, A side, B side, of just ambient, Lorne, Blade Runner music. So all of those artists, all four that we mentioned, I think all have different parts of their catalog, different percentages of it being ambient, but they all excel when they make ambient. And I love listening to their music.
That's cool that the ambient's doing well for you. Like, we're growing definitely, and I've used all my skills from running the marketing agency, like really trying to actually market this project. And it's done well, but I've always felt like the niche just is limited. And but hearing
So,
you get so many streams on ambient stuff, it's like maybe it's not going to be as limited as I thought.
well, I hate to steal a conversation, because you and I could just sit at a campfire for 3 years and
Yeah.
go back and forth, and then we'd go, take a siesta and come right back and have 3 more years of stuff to talk about. But in a nutshell, what happened was there's a guy named One Heart. He's a kid from Russia, and he put out a record called Snowfall. You might not know it by name, but I guarantee you've heard it in like a reel or a TikTok. So him and this guy Redenshi made this record Snowfall, and I think currently it's closing in on like 700 million views on Spotify alone. It
Damn.
has millions of TikToks, millions of reels. That record exploded for next generation ambient listeners. So it's not just people like us who are listening to ambient like we have been. It's like all these young kids who are like, oh, this is great. What is this? And thanks to the internet, you can associate it with Prometheus, with Covenant, with video games, Alien,
Yeah.
Blade Runner. Full circle, Dreamscape, the label I was telling you about, that's who that record was signed with. And that's the label that I'm working with right now, who released that song. And their infrastructure is great. They've got a really good in-house marketing team. They know like who to talk to when a new record comes out. If it's on like a lighter, more melodic side, they have people to push that. If it's on a darker, Ryan Gosling on the stairs crying,
That's
Blade
what I
Runner
am.
vibe.
That's what I am.
And they have their people to send it to there. And yeah, they push along. And then I have 24/7, who's a buddy of mine, Harris. He runs his other label and he has his own ecosystem. But again, it's people who just want like that sound, and they can, because of the way the internet's set up, they can just go and find it so easily, as opposed to, you used to have to know a guy who knew a guy who knew about ambient works, and you found out about it through the grapevine, because it definitely wasn't getting recommended on iTunes.
Definitely not.
At least back in the day, definitely not.
We can just cut straight to video games. Why we're here. Check out his previous 2 episodes. You can learn about Headphone Activist's gaming history. You are what I would consider, I mean, I don't want to gatekeep, but like, you're just as much of a gamer as anybody, right? You're just a genuine gamer.
Yeah, I would say before life got to be, this is what I love about gaming. Before my life became emails and shows, and it's so full now, like yourself included, I have so many people in my life who I consider friends and family. Gaming was like it. I had my direct family, a couple friends I grew up with, but most of my time, if it wasn't spent outside doing stuff, was locked in the house trying to beat Fight Night, Def Jam's Fight Night or something, and playing all the characters or going through all the old Hitman games. I mean, I have so many hours gaming. It's probably, I mean, I'm in good company, so it wouldn't be embarrassing to admit the number, but I've lost track of how much hours I've put into gaming because I love it. Yeah, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, you guys have a cool little Discord with the hub with Collaba, and I'll like pop in and just like lurk every once in a while, watch you guys play a game and not even, because you guys are into the game, you might not even notice. Just be like, I'll be up at night and like, oh, maybe I don't want a game. And you guys are there's always someone hanging out gaming on that Discord, which is really cool. So,
yeah, I'd say mostly lately I'm more into the play testing realm. I've really enjoyed using my time to play test stuff. If I'm not playing Apex ranked or I'm not enjoying, I just did another Red Dead run through, and if I'm not doing one of those, I'm in the hub pretty much every night that I'm online saying like, oh, I just got keys. You guys want to see this new thing I'm testing out? And,
yeah.
The one today when when you hopped in, we were play testing that a new arena breakout game, the Tarkov competitor.
Okay, so that's what I want to get in. I had a previous guest, Taze G. She's probably like a year and a half ago. She's a hardcore Tarkov player.
Cool.
So I learned a little bit about Tarkov from her and a lot about how hard it is to be a girl in such like a brutal like gaming is maybe not as male dominated because this Liam Brown, he's over the Pittsburgh Knights. He says
the esport team. Yeah.
The esport team. He says that they're about 60-40 split, 40% women at events and stuff. I was surprised.
Okay. I believe it at events. I mean, I'll put it to you like this. I played Tarkov for a lot of hours and I watch a lot of Tarkov streamers. And if there is a male dominated subgenre within gaming, it's definitely military sims right now.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of ladies who frag. Gingy is up there with the best of them. If you're familiar with who she is, she's a great content creator who's been crushing Tarkov and now Arena Breakout. She's been playing that all week.
Yeah, they're out. They're definitely out there. And Taze G. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Forgive me. We had a really great conversation, and I knew what Tarkov was a little bit because I try to keep my finger on the pulse of everything gaming, even though I don't have time to play everything.
Which is a tough statement in itself.
It's tough, and I'd fail. Yeah. And that's why you're here to kind of bring it up to speed. So for me and the listeners who maybe aren't, let me tell you what I know, and then let's have you fill in the gaps for us.
Cool.
I think it started with Arma. Was that the first military sim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Arma, it's as modern as you're going to get for like the origins of it. Before that, you're looking at maybe like the Delta Force games, but those aren't PvP, right? So if we're talking first PvP, PvE experience, Arma.
And then there's 3 Armas at this point now?
I believe so. And apparently there's like a 4th one in development, but I don't know the details of it. My closest understanding of that world is DayZ, which is like a mod, I believe, from Arma. Yeah.
And then so you have DayZ, and then wasn't one of the mods of Arma that I'm drawing a blank on the
Brandon Green for PUBG.
The Battleground. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So an Arma mod, PUBG was an Arma mod, and that spawned the whole Battle Royale.
So my understanding of it, and please correct us if we're wrong, because that's what the comments are for. But Arma was in existence. The ecosystem was strong. Brendan Green, however you say his name, developed a mod for Arma that was super successful, and from that spawned PUBG, which we all know was like a global phenomenon, because that's Fortnite before Fortnite.
Yep.
And you don't have Fortnite without PUBG, which you don't have PUBG without Arma.
Yes. Now, so you have PUBG. Now, during the PUBG time, were these other military sims like Tarkov starting, or did Tarkov come like much after all of this?
So that's a good question. I believe Tarkov isn't right there with the inception of those things. If it was up to me, I would say Tarkov probably fits somewhere in around the PUBG ethos, because I got into Tarkov phasing out of PUBG.
Okay.
It already had been around. It started as like a traditional military sim developed by Battlestate, which is I guess you could say Russian-based gaming company, who's now like a behemoth No longer can we call them an indie company.
Yeah, yeah.
They had built the game and trying to make the most hardcore military fighting experience possible. And that's with like the gun mechanics, with how you can mod your guns, varied types of ammunition, meaning that some can penetrate armor better, some can do more damage to flesh than others. And the details are insane, all the way down to being one of the first games that, for my opinion, had the full body mannequin cutout to say, hey, you got shot in the leg, so you have a wound in your leg, and now you have to take a specific type of med in order to fix your leg. All of that was pretty groundbreaking, and I believe that fits into the same time period of their like OG alpha test during the PUBG era. And then I would have got into Tarkov probably 2017, 2018. So I've been playing for a pretty long time now.
Yeah.
For people who like Tarkov, I got in before Labs was implemented, probably by 2 or 3 wipes before they put Labs in.
And for those us who don't know what that is, what does that mean?
So that means I got in. They do a wipe every 6 months or so, where all your loot and everything disappears. Everybody starts from bare bones, and they implement new maps, new guns, new content into the game. So I got in probably 18 months before they put in a map that's based in a laboratory. That was one of their first close quarter maps aside from Factory, which is the original map of the game. But it was a groundbreaking map. It introduced raiders, which are basically like juiced up AI. It was a really good time to be in the game. The community was really solid. The cheating wasn't like a thing like it is now. Furthermore, they just you could feel they really had the pulse on it, if that makes sense. Like when a developer or creative person like knows what they're making, here's what the community wants, they just keep building on that momentum. So that's kind of when I started playing the game.
Okay. Are there any other military shooters or sims, in your opinion, that are competitive with Tarkov? Because I don't really know what's going on in this scene. I know Tarkov, that's the only one I know. So to me, it seems like it's total domination. But is that the case?
It was, I think, and I think it still is to an extent. It's a long story, right? So I feel like we're going to kind of like drift with our conversation and then kind of come back and then tree branch to something else. This is the way I see it. When you played PUBG, as the era of PUBG ended, you either kind of went into the Tarkov route or you went to the Fortnite route in regards to shooters. Like you either went for more of a hardcore experience or you went into like building, double down on Battle Royale, right? Either good options, but at that point, I don't really think there was another military sim that scratched so many itches. I think DayZ and Arma have done incredible jobs, but as we see, DayZ still holds up, but Arma doesn't really have the same coding, and it's kind of, it dates itself. I think if you enjoy playing Arma, like awesome, but if you're asking me if Arma plays as good as like Apex Legends or as good as like Tarkov plays right now, I'd disagree. As time's gone on, because there wasn't really anything like Tarkov itself when it dropped, there's been stuff like Squad. Squad's more of like a hardcore version of Battlefield, but it doesn't have the same like looting element aspects that you get in DayZ or Tarkov, so it's not really as much of like a hardcore survival game.
The first video I see, the title is The Tumultuous State of Squad in 2024.
Yeah, Squad's wild. There's a bunch of different games that I think have aspects of Tarkov, but it's either like they have a similar looting system and survival system, or they have a similar military system in regards to the gunfights you're in and how like the guns work and everything. But in regards to the whole package, it's pretty much just been battle state games. I mean, until this year.
I want to make sure that me and by extension the listeners have some context. So this genre has obviously been growing.
Yeah.
And anytime something grows, there's money wants to get involved, right? Because there's money to be made. And then oftentimes we've seen in the gaming industry, like we mentioned before at the beginning of the podcast, gaming has become like music. It's just, there's like separate ecosystems and subgenres and niches within niches within niches. I mean, I exist in like I exist in a niche of a niche of a niche. Like that's my whole, right? It's retro gaming, but a niche within retro gaming. It's like gaming, retro gaming, emulation, indie hacks, ROM hacks, unofficial PC ports, and like all that weird random shit. Like I'm so far removed from this. So from my understanding though, Tarkov comes in, it starts gaining market share. I've been seeing more and more Tarkov content online just in general.
Yeah.
So I've been getting this sense that Tarkov is growing. Before we get into some of the controversy, some of the new stuff that you want to talk about, like build this up, like the history of the community and like why Tarkov was working and working so
Yeah.
well, so that we can understand what the more recent events, why they're a big deal.
100%. For me, when I started playing the game, what stood out to me is it felt like if you ever played a battle royale before and you got like a chicken dinner or first place in Fortnite, or you're the champion in Apex Legends, you are the legend. There's a satisfying feeling I get from those wins. But the more you play a game and it compounds, the shine kind of wears off of that win, you know? You're still stoked to win, but it takes like a tougher game, and it takes more like, oh, look at what my kill count was, or like I 1v3 the last team. It takes all these variables outside of the first time you play and the first time you win. It's like you don't care what the variables are. You're just glad you won a game. So that's a battle royale. Playing Tarkov, coming from a battle royale, every single raid plays like the most intense battle royale game I've ever played. I mean, I'm limping in one raid to the extract because I don't have the meds to fully heal my leg. Or in another one, I'm like metaphorically carrying my buddy right across the finish line. Where in another one, we're in full gear, just shredding everything we come across our path. And then in the one after that, we get ambushed by a squad in the woods, and we have to start from scratch. And then you add that element that you're bringing in your gear. You're not really finding it on the floor. You find items, but your kit you bring in, it's not like we're all paratrooping, dropping in and finding a house and getting gear. It's like I brought in this AK with this modded scope, this suppressor.
And you planned it out on purpose. You thought about what I want to do and what kit I need. Yeah.
And if I die, I can lose all that gear. So there's like that gear fear that we all know from MMORPGs and exploratory games. So playing that for the first time, I was like, this is, my friends and I used to say it's crack. It's like the most closest thing we could ever say. We felt like a drug experience from a video game in regards to like, I just lost 10 hours of the day and I don't even know where they went. And that lasted for a very long time for me with that game. So in Tarkov's heyday, I think that's kind of the core experience that they gave to people. And then it pulled to so many different branches, whether you're a gun enthusiast, like gun enthusiasts who don't play video games, play Tarkov because they love how true it is to guns. I mean, I
know a bunch of dudes that only play Tarkov. They're not gamers, but they play Tarkov.
Oh, they play Tarkov. Yeah. Like I remember when I was trying to figure out how to build my first gun, we used the Tarkov interface for customizing guns with the guy I know who builds guns and doesn't play video games. He's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Way better than anything they were using at their shop for building guns for people as templates. You have that side of it. Then you have, for me, the enthusiast of a PC shooter. It doesn't get much better than that. When you're at the top of Tarkov, you feel like you are the ultimate badass. And then let's expand out from that with the evolution of the game to go to your point. Community's growing. The Twitch people who are behind it are great. We're talking older streamers like Deadly Slob, Markstrom, Codden. These are just a few of the guys. Pastilli, Willers, Clean. Clean's like a really well-known name in like gaming in general, but specifically hardcore survival military sim games. One of my favorite people who beta tests. And they're all playing the game. You'd have your summits and your shrouds and people like that dabble, but most of them wouldn't last more than a couple of days because it was so much different than these other games they're playing. And then somewhere during the pandemic, Battlestate had enough momentum that they did Twitch drops, and it changed everything because now you could go watch Dr. Lupo, Shroud, Summit, whoever, and as you're watching them, you're getting gear for yourself in game, which is like, it's really good gear. It's stuff that you'd have to go into raid for. So us as current players loved it. And the craze of all these big streamers playing it brought in so many people to play, because not only is it that vibe of like, oh, this is the new hot game, but that's the new hot game, and everybody's locked in their fucking house for the next year and a half.
Yeah.
So that's when it kind of went from being this like top 20 game in Twitch and became a top 3 game on Twitch and kind of like just stayed there for a few years. More players came in, expansions happened, some good, some bad. But the biggest problem was all of the stuff we saw with PUBG and Fortnite and other games, the cheaters came in droves because Tarkov also, sorry if I'm saying a bunch of stuff, but Tarkov
No.
also has like a real world
Educate us. Just go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tarkov has a real world money system, right? So say I go into raid and I get a bunch of gear out, I can go then into a community store where I can put stuff up on a market. I believe they have stuff like that in World of Warcraft. And
I know CS:GO has like a whole ecosystem.
CSGO's is definitely relevant for skins, right? So this is kind of like that, but the currency you're getting back is based around the currency in game, right? So it's supposed to stay there.
But
however, third-party websites started to get developed where people could go and buy in-game currency from cheaters who just farmed all day. And anyways, it became like a whole running business for, I don't know, a couple of years. It might still exist, but they've got it a little under control. But the basic idea is the game was promoting cheating because not only is the game difficult, so wall hacks and aimbot is, great for somebody who's crappy at a shooter. But the economy side of things where it's like, hey, like I just made $50 today for cheating on a few people, grabbing this gear, getting out of raids, selling it all for the in-game currency, and then swapping it to another player's account. Basically, in my opinion, was the beginning of the end of that era when I got into the game.
Because people are incentivized not to cheat just to win, but they're making money.
Yeah, and then there's the other side too, where like people love the game and they want to win and they hate losing. And I say this with all due respect, like I don't cheat, but like I stomp in those games. You literally just saw, me and Christian in our raid just destroying a fire team, taking our stuff out, no problem. And I can only imagine how frustrating it is because I hate when I lose. If I'm losing game after game after game in an experience like that, cheating probably seems pretty like, as you lose each time, you get closer and closer to downloading the cheats. And I think when you talk about games that are that tough to play, and then you have gear fear and all of that incorporated, it just screams like cheat. But for context, if anybody didn't know this existed or was a thing, there's a great video that was made like a year or two ago of a guy who went in for like a few months going to raids, and he had this experiment where he was jiggling, right, going QE with his keyboard to do the lean. And the lean's like a notorious thing in Tarkov that characters will do to kind of say, hey, friendly, right?
Yeah.
So he went in with ESP cheats and started looking at players who couldn't see him and they couldn't see him and vice versa. And he was doing that and they would do it back to him because they both had
the cheat.
Yeah. And there's this crazy documentation of it of like 60% of the raids he goes to. That's 6 out of every 10, I believe. He goes and he can find people doing that.
For those listening, you should see what we're talking about here, which is, I see it now. The YouTube channel's GOAT.
He got in a lot of trouble from the community for that. Not from people like us, but like Battle State frowned upon it. A few other people tried to be like, oh, he's promoting cheating. And it's like, dude, he's not. He's actually showing you that like the reason you're dying so much now. Because I'll tell you, man, when I used to play it to where I play now, it's so different. And that's what I got from playing Arena Breakout this week is like, oh, I'm winning most of my raids. Like I'm enjoying these firefights. It's not like I turn a corner and some guy's waiting there because he saw me from however far away with his wall hacks with a little thing that says how many meters I am from him.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy how much cheating changed Tarkov as an experience.
So Tarkov is still going, but do you feel like it's contracting overall because of the cheating?
I think the cheating started it, right? I think it's a mixture, right? So the cheating and the Twitch drops and all of that and the explosion of their fan base and user base. So that's part one, right? That whole thing we just talked about. Part two is this whole time they've been developing this thing called Arena Tarkov. I don't know if you checked that out at all, but basically it's them trying to make Apex Legends has an arena mode. If you ever played that, it's like that. Feels a little like Counter-Strike, but it's not. They basically were trying to make an esport sub game of Tarkov, right? And they put
Mm.
a ton of money into it, and it was a massive fucking flop. I mean, it's horrible. The whole way it's set up is just not good. My opinions are not that of the hosts and or anyone else, but this is just my thought.
But it
They
sounds like
took
you're not the only one that thought that.
I think the whole community kind of agrees because it's weird. Like you go in to play a fight and you have base gear to fight with, and you're going up against these huge super characters where, like, because of the way Tarkov's core game is designed, your ammunition can't even penetrate their armor. But you're stuck in the lobby to fight them because if you leave, you get, a penalty. So you have to deal with 20 minutes of just being kind of like a scrub, and there's no counter to it, and they never fixed that. And then the matchmaking was a mess, and the audio is a mess. And anyways, regardless of how it performs, the issue with it, to go to part 3, is they spent a ton of money on developing Arena, right? Then sometime, I don't know, probably in like the last month or two, they did a wipe, right? Like we talked about, where they clear everybody's cache and, implement a patch. And they dropped the patch notes and basically said, hey, we're implementing this new game mode, or it's like a new package in the game, and it's like the Unheard edition or whatever. And basically it's a pay to win pack. And the reason it's bad isn't just because it's a pay to win system. There's tiers of packs that you buy in Tarkov. Basic edition, a tier above that, a tier above that, and then there's Edge of Darkness called EOD. So EOD is a $150 game that you could buy, and a lot of us bought EOD.
And what do you, for those who don't, you're getting better starting gear with these packages?
You get better starting gear, not a lot, but enough. You get a bigger secure container, which is basically a container that goes with you from every raid. It's a total upgrade, but every player has one. Your container's just bigger.
You can hold more gear. Yeah.
Yes. The caveat, though, to why EOD was so important was they get you with the basic edition. You'd be like, this is one of the greatest games ever played. And you could upgrade your current account for EOD. So instead of having to pay 150, you just paid the difference to get to EOD.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason most people did, aside from enjoying the game and wanting to support Battle State, is it was guaranteed that you would get all future content for free. Like you would get every
it's like a battle pass. You get all the future stuff. Yeah.
But like all the stuff, like if like when Arena came out, they charged $30 if you don't own Arena, but if you had EOD, you just get Arena, right? So that was the deal. Then a month ago, they made this post that was like, hey, we're backtracking on what we promised people forever, and we finally implement this big thing into the game, and you owe us another $100, even if you've already given us $150. And the community fucking lost it.
And how long ago was this?
Inside of 60 days, probably.
Okay. Are they backtracking the backtrack? Because we just saw recently with Helldivers in the Sony PSN, the reviews freaked out and they backtracked.
Quarter of a million negative reviews in like 2 days. It was crazy. Battlestate's kind of retracting. It's weird. They're like trying to say like, oh, we'll give EOD people like a trial period now with the thing that we said they'd have to pay for. But the problem is it's like a Pandora's box, right? Like they can't take back what they did because the whole community saw that basically their game took off. It got to a point where they thought like, hey, we'll make an esport out of it. That failed. They hemorrhaged money doing it. And then they had to try and double down to get all of the money back that they had lost.
So you think the motivation is they just lost too much money with Arena?
I think that's the only thing that could make sense when you consider that, like, when they made the post for this new Unheard edition, they went online and were removing the text from EOD's account info to say, like, if you get a EOD, you get all updates. They changed that live. And there's actually stuff on Twitter from that guy Clean. Somebody had like a web archive thing of what it used to be.
Yeah.
And like they were doing a side
internet,
by side.
The Wayback Machine doesn't forget.
That's
you guys can't do this shit. Like,
no,
we have the Wayback Machine and the internet never forgets. So I don't know why you would even try that, because you're going to get found out This brings me up to a question. This is just general. I had someone on recently. It's not out yet. He's a musician named Swarm. I don't know if you've run across him. Makes
I
like
know, I know the name. Yeah,
yeah, it's like hyper aggressive, dark electronic.
it's
Um,
good.
it's
Yeah,
very good, and he's in the middle of blowing up right now to sit a song with Bad Omens. Super nice guy. Gave me his time. He's drowning in opportunities, and he made time for me. So thank you,
that's
sir.
dope.
But he brought up this idea that when you start making money, because we see this happen in the gaming industry all the time, where there seems to be this disconnect between a developer or a publisher in the community, and they can't extrapolate and think a step ahead and be like, if I do this, it's going to blow up in my face. And it seems so obvious that like how do we keep having these things happen over and over again where you could literally just like go to any forum, any Twitch stream, Reddit, and just like sleuth ask some people, what would you think if we did that? You could like, it would not be hard to find out that this is going to blow up in your face. You should just intuitively know it if you're keeping the finger on the pulse of your community, and if you're developing the game for your community, you're listening to them, the features. Like, how do you not know that, hey, we promised this, we're going to double, and now you owe us another $100? How do you not know, or do you know it's going to blow up in your face, but you're like, we'll get through it, we'll survive? Like, what do you think the thought process with that? Because we've seen this
Yeah,
happen so much, not just in gaming, but you see it in all sorts of media. Like,
I think there's like two responses I'd have. The first would be, I mean, it piggybacks off what you said. Like getting like a sense of the pulse of the community has never been easier. And trust me, Battle State at least they had an incredible like, oh, hey, like, what do you guys think about this? Like they could tweet that and they'd have thousands of feedback. And like the guys who play, like I mentioned, the Cleans, Landmarks, Pastilles, the guys who make all this content and are part of the giveaways and are really good community members, like they can do the same in their sub communities easily. It wouldn't be tough for them to figure that out. And Pastilli, this great Australian content creator, brought up a great point to piggyback off him. He was saying like, if they flat out were just like, hey, like we took a swing and we missed with Arena, right? Which everybody wanted, by the way. I'd be lying if I said the community didn't get super stoked and wasn't excited for Arena, because they were. Everybody before they played Arena thought it was a great idea. It just didn't
work out. Yeah.
So if they express that like, hey, we're kind of in a rut because of that, and we're going to implement this new mode, and how about it cost this price, but if you own EOD and you just give us $10, we'll just, like, don't make it $100 price tag, make it a $10 price tag.
Yeah. And
right?
be real.
And be real.
Yeah.
And like, I think they would have had a completely different response, because that would have been like, hey, we're all here, we're all playing, we love this game, we want it to succeed. Sure. But they didn't. Right. So there's that side of it. The other part, more money, more problems. Like I tell people this all the time. Like, I remember when I was getting my music career started, I would go to the grocery store to buy groceries for the week, and I could get a bag of rice, cheese, and then I could pick a couple Healthy Choice, if you know what that microwavable meal is, Healthy Choice meals, and those were like my treat, right? And like that was me for a really long time, man. And I remember this day that I was at the grocery store, I don't know, a year or two, it was recently, where I walked in and I'm just like, yeah, fresh mangoes, like get some greens, couple green juices, fresh Italian bread. Like I stocked up, but like I was in that moment, had forgotten how tough it was when I was having to pick between the sirloin steak Hungry Choice meal or the Japanese mango chicken one. You know what I mean? Like it's as money presents itself, it now becomes, oh, well, I can afford so much than what I used to be able to afford. I don't remember what it was like to be.
That's exactly what Swarm was saying. He said that there's just an inevitable disconnect that happens with success.
That's the pulse, right?
Yeah,
the pulse that I keep referencing. I think like they were at a point where they were like, great, we have 10,000 players and people are buying our game and they're telling their friends about it and it's great. And then Twitch takes off and they're getting 10,000 fucking sales a day, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, you go from this like incredibly low key thing into like a behemoth. And who's shown us that better than like EA
Hmm.
or any of the other AAA companies? I mean, the Star game that just came out, was crazy developed, and it got maybe 2 days of streamer love, and then
It's done. Yeah.
it's done.
I
Yeah.
was actually quite interested in that game, and then its lackluster landing made me think like, there's so much to play in so little time.
I
You
know.
do kind of rely on how the community and the hype and the internet, like, am I going to give this a shot or not? Because I have, my backlog on Steam is 1,000 games. Like I have plenty.
I
Do I
know.
need to buy another one? Right?
And then you got emulators, and you got,
Yes. Yeah.
if you want to take it back, which I've been doing recently, and it's just like, sure, they could put out some patches and revitalize it the way CD Projekt Red did for Cyberpunk, and like hats off to them.
I just replayed Cyberpunk, so I played it at launch, and I thought it was okay. I played it on PC, so I didn't have
It's
massive
cool, but it
bugs.
was a mess. It was a
It was,
total
and it
mess.
was like I didn't play a lot of the side content. I think I beat the entire game in like 17, 15 hours. And this is after putting 140 hours into Witcher 3. So I was coming
Yeah.
into it like it's going to be Witcher 3 but Cyberpunk. I liked it, but it was like just much smaller in scale. Forgot about it. After Phantom Liberty came out in the final patch and I have a new 4090, I'm like, I need to go back with the ray tracing and DLSS 3.5 and like just visually kind of see how the game, because I own it, right? I booted it up. I played it. I'm like, damn, it's way better. Let me buy Phantom Liberty. And I started a new save. And 200 hours later, it's my all time favorite game.
That's so cool.
Like the
That's so
redemption
fucking
arc on
cool.
that game,
Unbelievable.
it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Now, the problem is people hated that game when it came out. People
Oh
were
yeah.
very, very angry. So I guess the question I'm leading into, as a Tarkov community member, if they were to say, okay, headphone activists, we fucked up. Give us lay us the groundwork of a redemption arc for Tarkov. What could we do?
Well, so that's the thing, right? I don't even know if like laying out a template would work, right? There's so many interesting aspects to this because we've seen it, right? Because we're becoming smarter as consumers, so we kind of know where we're going with this. PUBG, same similar arc, different game, different storyline, but small company, small idea, behemoth $30 million sales, right? Then turns into the biggest cheating, anti-cheat back and forth, which was really easy for people to move over to Fortnite or go to Tarkov like I did. Tarkov is riddled with cheating, and it's been said, apparently, I could be wrong, but this is the quote that I was told, that the whole game's developed on Unity's engine. And the way they developed it with Unity, not discrediting Unity, but I'm just so people have more context, by implementing a stronger anti-cheat in Tarkov from the developers, apparently would break the game. Right. So there's really not a lot they're doing, as far as I can tell, with anti-cheat, aside from like manual banning and having the anti-cheat system that's currently in place. So if they don't fix that problem, the game just phases out, right? Because you can go play PUBG right now and you don't really run into cheaters. But it's also like lobbies take longer to queue and the community's not really there, and your friends aren't probably going to play it with you, right?
Its
So
time is over. So
yeah.
the idea is, I guess, when you make one of these games that trend, how do you stay trending as long as possible?
Well, I think it's more, how do you keep trending when you have competitors coming out against you, right? So PUBG's doing really great, and then EA is like, here's Apex Legends.
Yeah.
They pulled some people from PUBG over to Apex.
Yeah.
Same with Epic with Fortnite, and same with Battlestate with Tarkov. And what we're seeing in the last year, which is one of the things you and I talked about that I thought would be good to talk about, was I've been playtesting like so many different military sim alphas and closed betas like this month, that are companies that have been working on their own versions of Tarkov, and they're all finally getting ready to launch. So like Tarkov's about to see its Fortnite, its Apex Legends, its whatever And then it's like, okay, so what do they do to compete with these companies that do have a good anti-cheat and are listening more to community feedback? And it's a free to play battle pass versus $150 entry fee.
Yeah.
Right. So
So then
I don't know.
they have the wisdom of hindsight. They can look at what Tarkov did and be like, okay, we're not gonna make the same. I'm assuming some sort of architectural programming choices at the foundation that are gonna make it so we can't have a better anti-cheat in the future. We're not gonna make that mistake.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to speak to you about some of the stuff I've been playtesting because I feel like that's what your audience would love to hear too. Is I'd love to give you some feedback on what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
I just
let's go through them and tell people what you've played and what you like and what you don't like and maybe what you see. Let's have you try to be a prophet and be like, predict what you think is going to stick, and we can come back and check.
No, let's time stamp it in a capsule. That sounds awesome. Okay, so the first thing I picked up was Gray Zone Warfare, another indie developer. It's built on Unreal Engine 5, so it looked pretty good, but it's also mostly using Unreal assets. The caveat there is like you're not going to see a ton of groundbreaking stuff in that game that we're not going to see in other games that get rolled out over the next few years. However, they hit the nail on the head with a few different things. Tarkov is PvP only. They just implemented a PvE mode, but it's a mess how it's tied in with the paywall thing that we we're talking about. Gray Zone, it's like $35, lets you go in and you can go play PvP with your friends, or you can take your friends and go do PvE in a separate server, but in the same exact identical landscape, same weapons, same attachments. You can farm up in PvE and then go with your crew back into PvP and
So
fight.
you can gear up and then
not get griefed while gearing up.
Yeah.
So game changer. Also throws you in like, I think like a fictional Vietnam looking jungle. And
it looks almost like Far Cry.
Yeah, has a lot of
Tropical.
people referenced Far Cry vibes. And it reminded us a lot of Scum. If you ever played Scum back in the day. Scum was another competing survival shooter that did well, but not as well as like Tarkov. So Gray Zone was super cool, full of bugs. Wasn't ready for them to roll out, but I think they saw the community fighting with Tarkov in battle state as much as they did, and they're just like, "Hey, next week, if we're gonna have this on Steam, if you guys want to come play it," and they knew what they were doing. The next one is Project Wraith. I haven't got to play much of it, but I've watched a lot of gameplay of it. I don't even think it's still called Project Wraith, but basically it's like at the bottom tier of the stuff I've seen so far. It feels like kind of a cash grab looking at the content of it. So that's just my opinion on it. If somebody feels otherwise, I'd love for you to get to hear their side on it, but that's just me weighing my hat in the ring. The big one is Arena Breakout, which we are all play testing right now. They just did a big key giveaway in the past few days where they had streamers playing it for a week. And then I got access 3 days ago, and I've been playing like 10-hour days, like easy, just like I used to with Tarkov.
It's stuck. Yeah.
It's stuck. Yeah. So it's developed by the same company who made Super People. Have you ever played Super People before?
I've never heard of it. Super People.
Super People was basically an off branch of PUBG, but with abilities, right? Imagine Apex Legends game like core, but with PUBG's like look and interface and gunfighting. So you have PUBG, but your characters have skills and abilities and all that stuff. They're legends, right? So they made that. It didn't really succeed super well, but I guess simultaneously they were developing this Arena Breakout game, which is like a more casual version of Tarkov. It has a lot of the hardcore firefighting and the looting side of things and the medic system that we talked about before, but it cleans out all the gunk that you run into with Tarkov. Matchmaking's way better, so you're not sitting in queue forever. I've been playing the playtest for 3 days. I've crashed twice. Right? That's pretty impressive for a playtest. I crash in Tarkov all the time still. Not as bad as I used to.
When you say it's more casual, explain a little bit more what that means.
Yeah, so maps aren't as big, so it's easier for you to rotate around. So you're not spending as much time in raid, and it's easier to get gear out and build up your wealth in your inventory, which is like a key component of how you succeed in the game, is having good gear so you can keep raiding. The matchmaking's phenomenal. So you can go in with your friends. You have no issues, which I think is an important thing to mention because a lot of new games come out that are shooters and they're like, oh, play with your friends, but you can't even queue up
Yeah.
with your friends on launch. So they figured that out right out the gate. And then if you're playing solo, traditionally, it's very tough to find people to play with if you want to be in a group. And if you play in Tarkov, you can go solo, but you're going to run into a bunch of like four-mans. And it's like, good luck. One guy versus four guys, maybe get one of them, two of them, but the third or fourth will probably kill you. In Arena Breakout, they auto queue with you with whoever, and you guys get matched up. Sometimes they're of your caliber and skills, sometimes they're not because it's a play test. But the cool thing about it is in Tarkov, if you have teammates and they misfire, they can kill you through like friendly fire. It's like a whole problem of like you're in a raid with like somebody who you don't know or a friend, and you guys get in an argument, and then the guy just turns and shoots you, and you're out of the raid.
Yeah.
In Arena Breakout, if you're on a team together, they can't damage you.
So it's less about like, hey, we'll sacrifice a tiny bit of realism just for player experience because. Yeah,
it's a huge quality of life increase because now you don't have gear fear from your own team. If somebody's scared and they fire, like you don't take damage. It's very Call of Duty in that regard. The next thing they put an in-game map. So in Tarkov, you get no maps. You have to know where you're going or learn the maps and the worlds, and it takes a long time for the players to do that. In Arena Breakout, they give you a map that you bring up with the M key on your keyboard, and you can see where you are, where your teammates are, and where your objectives are. And it's basically like you get home from work, you have 3 hours that you can play, that you don't have to worry about dinner or the kids or anything like that. Are you going to go maybe like learn one map in Tarkov, maybe get out of one raid if your teammates don't kill you? Or do you want to go take like 30% of that intensity down and go play like 6 raids with your friends and random people and quest and get some cool stuff and win some and lose some and still get that experience, but removing the intensity that kind of, makes people want to summit 1G their monitors and just break their shit.
I've been watching there's a YouTube channel called Jack Frags. It looks like it's pretty big. 4.1.
I love Jack Frags. Yeah. If you guys like shooter video games, he's one of the best in regards to reviewing new stuff.
And he has a very new video 12 hours ago. Arena Breakout is capital way better than anyone expected. So he seems to be on the same wavelength as you. Video quality is really good. It's uploaded in 4K. The game looks awesome. Graphics look cool.
It's fun. It's fast. It's risk versus reward, and you can feel it, right? Like you can move fast and maybe get taken out. You can move slow like a sniper. It has all the elements that we talked about with Arma, with DayZ, with Tarkov, with Hunt Showdown. I didn't even mention Hunt Showdown. Like so all these different.
I am aware of Hunt Showdown.
All these different games that I love to play, but they Call of Duty'd it just a little bit, and it's great. And I thought with everything going on and all these games that I'm testing, because I'm such a fan of the genre, that when you and I were chatting about memes and day-to-day music stuff, that I should just say like, hey, if you want, I'd love to speak on this because your audience is awesome. Your listeners have been super cool and supportive of my music and also every time I'm on the show. And if I can give any feedback so they can say, hey, in 30 minutes, I just learned about like a 5-year, 7-year thing.
Yeah.
I hope I can help.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I just view it as like, hey, if I don't know about it and I don't have the time to keep up, like I'll just bring somebody on. It's entertaining for me, and then there's a certain percentage of the audience is gonna feel the same way. And I'm sure there's some people who are into shooters. I mean, shooters in general have always been really popular.
Yeah,
I got way into Halo, and then I got into Halo Infinite when it came out as like a nostalgia thing for like 6 months. But I've always been watching the shooter landscape, and I have been keeping my eye in the pulse with Tarkov again because I've had a guest specifically previously come on about Tarkov.
I mean, it's a gaming phenomenon. It became
a phenomenon. So it's like, okay, well, I just have to sort of track just the industry in general and at least be aware of things so that when people bring them up, I can kind of talk about them and I can kind of be a middleman between the audience and the person who's more knowledgeable.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole, it's like, okay, I knew Tarkov blew up. I didn't know that this combination of COVID and these Twitch drops was a big driver. I was like,
I think it was. I think it was. The game's also was really good, and I mean, it still is a great game at its core. But yeah, that what perfect storm, right? George Clooney, just like that, it happened, and the game can't really go back to that place. I think because of it. And so, if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of like full circle your original question with that. Now that we have all that information, you were saying like, what does Battle State do? Like, hey, Headphone Activist,
Yeah.
what should we do? I think it's this. We now see that in the last month, 3 different companies are dropping test games that are competing with Tarkov in their alpha state. They're not as good. They need a ton of work. Even Arena Breakout, it's not perfect by any means, but it's good. It's like for people who like games like that. Everyone who I'm playing it with and who's coming over from Tarkov all agrees this is fun and it's addicting and it's everything you'd want it to check. So I think for Battle State, it's their issue that they're having is now they're, like I said, they're going to face like their Apex Legends, their Fortnite, just like, Red and Green and PUBG did. But the real kicker is what I've been thinking about for the last 3 days. What's EA up to, and DICE and like Activision and all these other companies who haven't really put anything out yet. They've done a little stuff with like Battlefield and Warzone and stuff like that. But like what Sleeping Giant is working on something right now
on a military sim. Yeah.
Yeah. And like when that hits, what's that going to look like? And that's who I think Battle State has to worry about, isn't just like these competitors who are good. Like what happens when a AAA studio comes out of the woodwork and is like, go play this.
Yeah.
And yeah,
which they will. Like I mentioned,
it happens.
The big money is going to see the money and be like, okay, we can do this.
Do you mind if I ask you a question? I know it's your show.
No, you can't ask me any questions, dude.
I didn't want to break format. Did you play New World at all? When
Amazon's New World?
Yeah.
No, but I have a really good friend. Shout out to Justin Quick or Think the Musician. He's a huge fan of New World, and he's been chatting me on Discord about New World for a while. Yeah,
it's dope.
And Warframe. That and Warframe are like his two bread and butters.
Everybody I know who plays Warframe loves Warframe.
Yeah.
Man. New World's a good example though, where it's like great game, but I feel like right when New World came out, there was already games that kind of existed like it before it had dropped. And then there was plenty of stuff rolling out post New World to compete with it. I couldn't say it by name because I don't play that genre of game as much. But my point is like for every studio, even at Amazon's level, there are competitors. Right?
Yes.
So like Battle State doesn't get exempted from that, right? Like if Amazon can be competed against, indie development behemoth of a company in Russia definitely can be competed against when you're looking at gaming houses that are based in like China, Japan, Australia, United States, Canada, the UK. Like that's a lot of like very profitable, money rich companies that could totally come in and develop something that pulls a lot of their audience away. And I think what's so significant about this conversation is this week, everybody's playing Arena Breakout and they're like, oh, like it can't be as good as Tarkov and it won't replace Tarkov. And it's like, well, it's not as good as Tarkov and it's not replacing Tarkov, but everybody who would be playing Tarkov is playing that right now. Mm-hmm. And Tarkov that sat in the top 3 to top 10 of Twitch prior to that announcement of wanting the $100 and the new hack thing now sits at this evening when you and I linked up, there was like 7,000 people viewing the game. It's sitting at like number 30 on Twitch right now.
Damn. Yeah. I just put in Tarkov on YouTube and after the first sponsored post, a channel that I'm not familiar with, called Level Cap Gaming. There's a video called I Think Tarkov Just Killed Itself, and they're talking about the specific thing that you just brought up.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways to look at it. This is to crystal ball it, the time capsule. I think what happens is Tarkov will go back to kind of where it was 2016, 2017.
Consistent niche, but not at the behemoth. Yeah.
I think it'll maintain its player base. Some people want to play it. It'll really lean into the extreme side again over time. And like that's where it'll live. And maybe they'll develop other games and they'll have success as a company. But I feel like their era of that PUBG, like everybody's playing PUBG because there's nothing like PUBG. And then eventually that was over.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where we're at with
that makes sense
Tarkov.
because it sounds like Breakout is taking bits and pieces of it and making it Call of Duty, right? Reducing the extreme a little bit to make it more palatable. And Tarkov could basically not rebrand because that is the brand of Tarkov, but lean more into like, okay, but we're the most extreme. We're the most hardcore.
And you totally can. But I feel like if you can't really open up like a gaming, if somebody looks up gaming stuff, which we all do on YouTube and Twitter, you can't really open up YouTube and Twitter right now without seeing something about Tarkov, right?
Yeah.
Like it's all anybody's been talking about, more specifically in the last month since that happened. And it's quieted a bit, but yeah, I've been so invested because I've been so, annoyed with the cheating problem with the game and the way the game's going. And that announcement happened that I was so like, I'm not playing the game anymore. And then all these all these new companies came out with their new betas and closed alphas. And it's been such like a redemption arc for me for the military sim side of a gamer that I was like, man, like I'm so happy and enjoying this so much right now that when we were talking, I was like, I should just offer to talk about it because it's a really interesting time, even though it's not a retro game. Like in gaming, to see a company that's like, hey, like we're gonna ask for $150 out the gate, pretty big, like order, and like then to succeed in that and sell millions of copies, and then to make something that fails, and then ask for $100 from the players that have already given them 150. Because I didn't say this, but if you hadn't bought the EOD, you owed them 250 because you had to pay 250
for
the whole thing. If you were a new person. And so that's when I'm like, man, I bet like EA and everybody was like, oh, are they going to do it? Can they convince all these people to spend all that money?
Here's the sucky part. Like, even if it pisses a lot of people off, but let's say if they sell enough people at 250, then someone else is going to want to come along and try the same thing.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool because it's the same thing with Helldivers, like you mentioned, where the community was just like, no, like you can't make people who don't have a PlayStation Network option like removed from this. Like they bought the game, like it's their game. Like, what is wrong with you? And their developers trying to be like, oh, so sorry. It's, like I didn't know it would be such a big deal to log. It's like, it's not the login, man. It's that you're removing these people who don't live in the same first world conditions that we do. And games are expensive.
And it wasn't like, it's one thing that like, cause I saw someone make a post that was defending, but they were saying like, hey, they're mentioning all these other games that require like a second account, even on Steam. Mm-hmm. But the difference is they require you from the beginning, and it's not 6 months later, I've been playing this game and now I can't play it anymore because I'm in the Philippines and I can't get PSN. And so basically you just took my game away from me.
Yeah, but without a refund, right?
Without a refund. And I paid for it. Yeah.
That's the kicker, right? It's like, oh, but you can't get your money back. It's like, really? Because I can't play the game. So technically I should. So to me, it's been a really great time for all of us where it's showing that in a world where corporations just feel like they're continuously just like, pushing along their agenda.
We're moving into that, like, speaking of Blade Runner, we're moving to that, like, cyberpunk corporate hellscape. It's coming true.
More and more every day. Yeah. And I think gaming as a community and all of us, we've done a really good job in the last few months of just kind of being like, no. Like, we are like the lifeblood of your game. And if we don't play it and we don't buy it, your game doesn't really exist. And I just wanted to take a second and say I'm really proud of the gaming community for like standing up
Yes,
on those multiple things.
that's a really good thing you brought up, because I, in the past, have complained about the entitlement in the gaming community as a whole. And sometimes people just really just, I don't know, like being embarrassed to be a gamer by certain things I see online. And that it can go both ways. But at the same time, that entitlement also can be good when you're like, no, you're not going to fuck us over. And no, we're not going to. And you get a little bit of both. But it reminds me of like, it's how the government's supposed to work.
I mean, yeah, with voting and everything,
With voting
like
and taxes, and like, you know, like, hey, we're not going to do this. And the one time I remember it working, I don't know if you remember this, it was probably, I think it was Obama's second term, and he's like, we're going to go to Syria, and everyone was like, left and right, like, no, we don't want to.
Yeah,
and they're like, oh, never mind, we're not going to Syria
we'll
anymore.
Take it back, right?
Yeah,
and like
it can work,
and I think it's a fine line, right? Like, you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen. Right.
Yeah.
But if every single person who steps in that kitchen is like, no, then it's like, okay, don't make that dish. I think part of the problem too is like, you and I've spoken about this before. Before we met, electronic music wasn't niche, but it wasn't the EDM conglomerate that we know it is as it is today. Right. And when I watched that happen, as a person who was in that world, nobody said anything. Checks got bigger. Crowds got bigger, merch was moving like crazy, and anybody who didn't want to participate, there was 10 other guys ready to take their job, you know? Mm-hmm. And now we have what it is now, which is like, it's cool, but EDM is no different now than country music is, or rock, or whatever. It's massively diluted.
It's diluted, and there are gatekeepers, and it's been overtaken. Like, it's controlled.
Completely. Yeah. We've long passed the SoundCloud era of music getting discovered and people becoming big acts. It still happens, but not like it used to.
TikTok enables people to break through. It's one of the few platforms where that's where I started.
Yeah.
I think the first time you came on, I wasn't doing social content. I was just like interviewing people. It was a tiny podcast just for fun. Yeah. Then the pandemic happened, and I started just like drinking and recording random clips and putting them on TikTok, and they blew up. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should take this podcast more seriously. I've found so much music on TikTok that I would have not found anywhere else. So I think there's like, it's still possible to quote break through, but what I've what I've noticed is like, even like someone like you, right? You work with these ambient labels, you get all these streams and stuff. But if you want to go play any sort of major EDM event, you've got to be part of the club. It doesn't matter.
It's hard to move tickets without Ticketmaster. You know what I mean? It's hard to work with these companies that are doing more than a few hundred people in a room. And you're not tied to some like corporation who's getting a cut or taking horrible care of your fans in regards to ticket sales and resellers, and it's a whole other thing. But the core of it is like, because you and I could go back and forth forever on this. It feels like gaming is finding its own way of kind of saying like, sure, a lot of crap's getting made, and there's plenty of weird paywalls with stuff, and there's microtransactions and all the stuff that we talk about that, you know, is bittersweet. But when it comes to like the user and getting the product that you paid for, which is the example with Helldivers and Tarkov, when companies are not delivering on that promise, the community is doing an incredible job of calling them on their shit. Yeah. And I'm really stoked about that.
Back to Cyberpunk. It's like, yo, this is not what you guys sold us.
Yeah. But to go to their defense, like they're able to at least say, okay, well, like we did Witcher and you guys loved Witcher, like just give us time, right? And like you said it yourself, like that arc, the redemption arc.
And the Witcher, I kind of knew that was going to happen. When I bought Witcher 3 day one, played it for like 2 hours and uninstalled it because it was a clunky mess. The same thing happened with Witcher 3. People forget.
But now it's considered like one of the greatest games of all time.
And it's the same arc. So whenever they put out another game, it's probably it's just, they make big games. It's hard. Another example would be with No Man's Sky. Amazing
Yeah.
redemption arc.
One of the worst launches in gaming history, probably, right?
And
Definitely in the top 10.
the community was very angry about what was shown and what was hyped up and what was implied or directly said this is what the game is going to have and contain, and then those features weren't in the launch game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the gaming community, that's a good point. Like, I don't know if it's, I wonder what the mechanism is. What is the mechanism? Because the music community, like, we're upset about certain things and ticket prices, and I know there's a lot of upset about like new laws in the U.S. with touring and visas, and international artists can't come
So
in.
glad I'm not a part of that.
Yeah, and there's some
Yeah.
anger, but like nothing's going to change. Like the big boys are going to do what the big boys are do, but in the world of gaming, it still feels like, to your point, we have the power to make a change. Like we can
Say
still
yes or no.
yes.
Yeah, we are him in Gladiator, right?
Yeah,
With the
Joaquin
thumb,
Phoenix.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think this. I'd love to get your thought on this, but I think it's with music. It's like I make the record, right? You make a song, we send it back and forth, and you and I can experience like your sound and my sound, right? And maybe we give that to somebody else, and like they don't make music, but they like listening to it, right? So that's three people experiencing it. But the only person who really feels it is like the person who made it. So like you feel your track more than I'm going to. I feel mine more than you do, and the listener feels it less than both of us. With gaming, though, we all have a controller or a keyboard and a mouse, and we're in those worlds and we're playing and we're choosing to do that over something else. Like we're all equal in regards to like, this is what I'm doing with my time. And that's where I think the big difference is. Like if you and I and that third person went in on a quest into a world and we all went in on a raid, we're all there looking at the boss together, fighting him together, dying together,
Yeah.
getting the loot and winning together. And music doesn't really have that component, you know?
I didn't even think about that. My brain was going more to like, okay, the reason why it seems it works in video games is there's a direct, like if we decide to review bomb you and get like it's pretty quickly that your income goes down, right?
Yeah.
So like we are the lifeblood of your game. If we don't like it and we don't play it, you don't make money.
And we don't microtransaction with cosmetics and battle passes and everything.
But it's like if you're throwing Coachella and you're in the hip hop world or the EDM world and you're a big player, you're a mover and a shaker, people might get angry, but like when you throw that event, you're still making money. There's no like, you're not in danger.
They also, that's why they pick the artists they pick, because it's like, well, if 1,000 people don't want to see this guy, they know 3,000 that do, because they're such behemoth artists, right? Like, yeah.
So there's no risk. Like you can be upset with the state of the music industry, but there's no direct way to take money out of the pockets of the people who, because you can be like, yeah, I'm upset, but I just don't see a world where everyone's like, you know what? We don't like what this promoter or Ticketmaster is doing, so we're going to stop. We're not going to go to the show. Yeah. But in gaming, that will happen. People will be like, I'm installing YouTubers and Twitch streamers. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my friends, like I have a few buddies and like love playing military sims with them. And they're like, when are you getting back on Tarkov? And I'm like, I'm not. Right. Literally like friends who like I enjoy spending time with. I'll sit with them in the Discord and watch them quest. I was like, I refuse to like log on and give it my energy. I'll sit here and work on music or answer an email or listen to a podcast while you play. But then Arena Breakout happens, Gray Zone Warfare happens. And what am I doing? I'm 10 hours back in the chair, ordering Uber Eats, just like, nope, no adulting right now. Just straight game time, man.
Yeah, it seems like there's a higher percentage of gamers who are willing to walk away from a product than maybe in other industries, whether it's film or music. But it does, to your point, it does seem like we have more leverage over the big companies. Like they listen to us. Like the representation mechanism, which in government is supposed to be voting in senators and all that stuff. It's a mechanism to represent the people's will and then get that will represented in laws. In capitalism, it'd be like the stockholders, right? These people put money into so you're supposed to do things that make them happy because they're funding your company essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's a representation mechanism. And gaming, we have social media, we have like your YouTubers and your Twitch streamers and your content creators are kind of like your senators for a community, right?
They are absolutely your representatives.
The representatives for sure.
Yeah.
And that system is still working more than maybe some of these other systems where the people in power will listen to the representatives and will make changes, even if they do something dumb. Like I'm still like, yes, I understand there's a disconnect with money and that the other artist Swarm brought that up. And that makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm still having hard time wrapping my head around it. In these big organizations where you have community managers, influencer managers, nobody stopped and went, hey, this might blow up in our face, dude. Or if they did, someone said, yes, but we're going to do it anyway. And then for what was their justification? Like, for example, Xbox just closed Tango GameWorks, which made Hi-Fi Rush. Shinji Mikami, who made Resident Evil, started this new studio, and they put out this game called Hi-Fi Rush like a year and a half ago. Straight from the gate, one of the most polished, amazing games I've ever played. It's a rhythm action game. Massively critically well reviewed. Didn't sell a bunch. It was like immediately dropped. They announced it and then it was available. And it was on Games Pass and they didn't market it that much. So I don't think it made a ton of money, but it was one of those games that was a slow burn because critically it kept getting so well regarded online, people talking about it, making YouTube videos. It was gaining steam, pun intended. Then Microsoft is like, they closed Tango GameWorks. And then the next day was like, we need more small gaming studios that make indie, critically acclaimed games. The day after, they just closed the studio that made their best reviewed game ever. So I watched this and I'm like, okay, with all the money in the world and you have community managers and people whose job is to literally know this stuff.
Yeah.
How are you still making these decisions? Or are you informed and you understand, but there's just stuff we don't understand, with money and whatever.
My context of what I'm hearing with that is like that studio is saying we need more companies to take risks and make these incredible indie games that are also going to sell like a new Call of Duty title when it launches, so we can keep our shareholders happy. You know what I mean?
Well, then you got to market it.
That's the part that they don't leave. They leave out of the tweet. Like it's you see it in all forms of art, in my opinion, where it's like, what is the line between absolute just reskinned, reshaded crap they're charging 60 to 80 bucks for versus like innovation and Witcher, Red Dead Redemption, Skyrim, these games where like you start playing and you don't even realize you're gaming, right? You are transported into a world and you're experiencing something more than a movie could ever do for you, and in a way more than a book could do for you too. And I think the core of it's this: regardless of who is sitting in the corporate office keeping the door metaphorically locked so everybody outside's like, don't ask them for $100 more. They're gonna get mad, and they're just like, shut up, we're gonna do it, and then they have to redact it. Or a studio who's puts out this incredible thing and then shuts it down, but like simultaneously is like, we need more of that. And it's like, well, then why'd you shut it down? Regardless of what the business ecosystem is within gaming, the only thing that matters is us as the consumers are smart with where we take our wallet and send it.
Exactly. So I did see a counter argument that was like, people were complaining about Hi-Fi Rush studio getting canceled, and someone tweeted, it was a good friend of mine, Christian Bretcher Hangover. It's like, yeah, but did you buy it? If you didn't buy it, that's your vote.
Yeah, and it's like you didn't vote, so you don't really get an opinion.
And right? I agree. And I'm like, true. I had Games Pass, and I'm sure they paid them a certain amount of money to be on Games Pass, and so I played it on Games Pass.
Yeah, but it's just like my stuff on Spotify when it gets streamed. I get a chunk of the subscription.
Yeah, and that is a vote. Like if I go and stream it, it's saying you're telling the system, "Hey, I like this content. I'm streaming it.
Keep this content going. Keep this content 100%. Going.
Yeah. So I don't know if on Games Pass, like is it like Netflix where they measure how many hours and engagement rate, how they decide which games? I don't know what's going on behind that. I actually canceled my Games Pass. I ended up spending way more money because it's like, oh, I can try games, and then if I don't like them, it doesn't matter. I was like looking through my Games Pass history for the games I actually finished and beat on Games Pass. I like quadruple paid for them.
Really?
Because if you think about it, I've had it for like 4 or 5 years at $20 a month or whatever.
Keep the subscription going. Yeah.
And it's I think I beat Hi-Fi Rush, and I think there was like 2 other games. And then with Steam, I know you're not supposed to abuse it, but like if I really want to try a game and I don't like it, I can refund it within 2 hours of gameplay.
Oh, I refund plenty. But you know what I also do? I have like probably 50 games minimum in my store that like I bought, and that's before all the VR stuff and everything like that. So like if I like something and I'm not going to play it for a while, I keep it because the developer got my time. They earned that money. I got the experience. Like
I also rebuy stuff. Like I bought Alan Wake 2 on Epic because it's Epic exclusive. And
we love Alan Wake also.
And I love Alan Wake, and I love Control. I love that universe. And I'm like, I waited for a while. Well, first I waited to get a 4090 because I'm like, I don't want to play that game until I can play it the way it was meant to be played. But then it was like, well, Control came to Steam. I'll just wait. But then I read that Epic funded that game, and it's going to be whatever. So I'm going to buy it. When it comes to Steam, I will buy that game again. Just to show the ecosystem that like, I want you to bring stuff to Steam, and I also like this game. So I'll buy it again.
I bought GTA twice, bought it for the PlayStation, wanted to experience it on PC, did not have a single problem buying GTA 5.
Same thing. Again. I do that with all the Sony exclusives. Sweet. I want to replay them on PC. Ghost of Tsushima is coming out on PC. I'm going to be all up on that, even though I've already...
100%.
Now, we're in a position where we have the disposable income to do that. Not everybody can just say, like, I want to buy every game that I think is good.
And Battle Pass and cosmetics. No, it adds up really quick. Yeah.
It does add up really quick.
But that's the value of the wallet in choosing, to go back to our point, like you really have to pick and choose who you're going to give your money to, because that says way more than just hours in on the game.
It says way more. It says more than it. That's the bottom line, more than all the tweets and all the comments. All the tweets and all the comments online only matter to the people because that translates, or it's an indicator of what that bottom line dollar trajectory is. So if you're developing Tarkov and then you do this thing and then you see all this negative feedback, you know that that's going to lead to less money.
Yeah. So
you're like, shit, okay, we got to rethink what we're doing potentially or whatever. So anything else you want to bring up? Like that was actually really, really good about Tarkov. And
I hope that was like enough info without word vomiting.
100%. I didn't know, like amidst all of this stuff, you have Bethesda stuff, you have Tango Gameworks stuff, you had the Tarkov, the Helldivers. It seemed like the last couple of months I got hit with a lot of gaming controversy stuff. So I was like just barely aware that something was going on with Tarkov, but I had no idea of any of these details.
I thought it was worth talking about. I'm glad you agree, because it's like, it's kind of crazy, right? To like redact what you said online, ask for another 100. Like, I mean, when I lay it out like that, you're like, dude, this is like...
It's also crazy to think that's
crazy.
It's a $250 entry point right now.
Yeah, and that's the pay to win mechanism. Right? Yeah, that's the like, oh, like you can buy the $30 whatever version, but the guy who bought the $250 gets like all the sniper scopes and the suppressors and the ammo. And if you guys run into each other day one,
and also cheaters. So you want that gear? Yeah. So it's like, good luck, dude. Enjoy that $30.
I thought it made for, and now like reflecting back on our conversation, it should make for a good Monday morning drive to work, to just be like, wow, that's really something, man.
Yeah.
Hello, Ashton here, the holy editor to the One True Gaming Podcast. Since recording this interview, there have been some updates, and we wanted to share Headphone Activist's thoughts on some of the updated news.
Now, I understand people could say they they redacted and have changed how they've been approaching the rollout since. And like, that's cool, but it doesn't change the fact that they actually tried to get away with charging people that much money to play a video game. When you take that, mix in with them trying to remove and change the wording of EOD's perks and what you get with EOD Online when they did that system, it's super shady and a really good example of how companies can make a ton of money and then start to completely lose track of the narrative. In this case, that's them making a killing with the initial sale of the game, having a boom over a long period of time with like Twitch drops and how that all went. And then thinking that, oh, it makes sense for us to try and do Arena and spend a ton of money on that when they could have just used the money they used to develop Arena to keep making like new maps and new content for the game.
Future of Headphone Activist. Where should people check you out? What's coming up?
Yeah.
Do you stream on Twitch gaming stuff?
I don't. I've been asked to a few times, but my whole life is like with art, with work is so like online, right? Like all the music I put out and then I put it out and it's critiques and it's good and it's bad. And there's so much of me that's already online. I think I'd have a lot of fun streaming, but I kind of keep gaming to myself and my friends.
I'm the same way. I get brought up like, when are you going to Twitch? I TikTok stream, but it's like, man, when I game, I don't want to do it like in an audience. This is my time to chill.
And I don't want to get to a point where it's like, oh, I don't have X amount of people here, so I'm not having as much fun as I would be if that was the case. Or like, I don't have that many people here like I did, so I have to go back to play a game I don't want to play right now.
Yeah.
And gaming is for me just this like, oh, I'm going to go play test this week. And then I'm going to go grind ranked league and hate my life for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I'm
going to go here and go there. But there's nobody that gets to say like, oh, that's lame, or why are you playing this game, or dumb or stupid. It's just my thing with my friends and the people I enjoy experiencing that with. I'll tell you this, just because I know you'll love this. I got the PlayStation 2 and N64 emulators set up.
Which ones?
Winter. Let me look real quick if you have.
There's really only one PS2 on PCSX2 that's worthwhile, but N64 you have a little bit more options, and there's some pros and cons to each emulator. Are you using RetroArch front end, or is it just a standalone emulator?
It's standalone emulator. Go to a website and just pick the thing I want to play, download it. But I went back and I played bunch of different Mario stuff. I mean, we could have a whole other podcast that would be like the fifth one, which could be the retro one if you want. But I never got to play the South Park game on N64. I gave that a run for like 20 minutes. Such a piece of shit, but it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I got to play the old Star Fox 64.
Yeah.
And really like try that again for a bit. Had the PlayStation set up, went and did all the Twisted Metals. Oh, that was fucking awesome playing Twisted Metal again. But yeah, I was thinking about, I brought it up because I was thinking about you while I was doing all that, and I was like, man,
you should have hit me up. I mean, I've been tinkering with emulators for 20 years, right?
Really?
It was like I started making social media content again during COVID, but I was trying to do what everybody else did. Like, oh, I'm going to record clips and be funny. I'm not a particularly super funny person. I don't like, sometimes they would land, sometimes they wouldn't. If I was like super smashed sometimes, but then I was like drinking all the time and my health was going down.
Yeah, no bueno.
It was not, I wasn't training, and it was just bad. So eventually, and I kept trying, like, well, maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll do that. And then I remember stepping back and being like, well, what do I actually genuinely do that's uniquely me? It's like, oh, I'm a super nerd about emulators, but I thought it wouldn't catch because on YouTube, hardcore emulation channels are really small. Like all of them are really, really small. It's like, well, fuck it. I'll just start making videos about what I'm doing with emulators. And they on the other social media networks, they've done really, really well. So my point is, I was already deep down that rabbit hole, but because now I'm getting reinforced for that content, I'm like even deeper in that rabbit hole. So if you want like anything emulation, like I want to play this game, let's figure out like the best way to play it. Just hit me up. We'll figure it out.
I'll probably have a few for you too, because I did Cool Borders, 1080 snowboarding.
I want to do a video on both of those. 1080 specifically. I mean, Cool Borders is awesome, but 1080 was
the soundtrack to 1080 is
yes,
phenomenal. But yeah, I was thinking about you while I was grinding and playing those because it was this really cool thing, right? So like, not to sidetrack, but like winter got here, it's the East Coast, you're inside dealing with the house problems. My girlfriend's travel nursing, so it's just me. And I got to that like late January where depression is more real than it is at any other time of the year. And my buddies got me set up on that, man. And just for like a couple nights, old school siphon filter, like, you know what I mean? I sat there and I played for an hour or two, go play Road Rash, whatever, and then hop over to something else and something else. And every time I played something that I had known, the retro gaming, right? That nostalgia and that happiness. And it teleported me like a time machine back to being a kid. I don't think I can emphasize how much I started to have a new level of respect for like what you do and like why your channel's dope, because there's so many games, right? And I can't play them all. Neither can you, as the beginning of our conversation.
There's too many.
But the fact that like we all share like that memory of like that game, that Twisted Metal in Paris blowing up the Eiffel Tower thing that I was showing all my friends. They're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I played that game 100 times. There's nothing like it, man. It's special. It's really special that we're fortunate enough to live in a time period where there's so many good pieces of art that were made that like we get to go back and play them like however many years later and they still hold
preserved. Up. Yes. I've become really passionate. Like the fact that you even had that as an option.
Yeah.
Right. Where there's a lot of, I mean, the digitization of the world has drawbacks, obviously. That could be a whole podcast. But the good thing is, you know, back in the day, if you couldn't get access to the Library of Alexandria, good luck.
I mean,
you had nothing.
Your echo chamber was just so.
You had nothing, right? First of all, you weren't even exposed to any art, and any art that was not physically near you, or you couldn't travel. Like, but with us, it's like I can go. I didn't have a Sega Saturn. I didn't get one.
I didn't have a Sega Genesis, right?
And if you want to go back and play those and experience anything from that, you can.
And I did, and it was cool. But you know, it was really cool playing the stuff I grew up playing. Like it was cool playing the stuff that like I didn't get to play, but I was also like, a lot of this, like the Windows kind of.
Yeah, you don't have the nostalgia with it, so it doesn't carry.
But going back and running with Beavis and Butthead through their high school and like, you know, the side-scrolling Beavis and Butthead stuff, I was like, this is the best.
I do think it's good for your mental health too. You were saying depression. One of the reasons I think we're nostalgia seekers, as you were talking about it, I had a real-time realization. I think when you put your head back into when you were a kid and life was less stressful, it brings your stress levels down a little bit. Your mind's not spinning.
Completely agree with that. That's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And it also puts you into like when you're a kid, you have your like you have all this hope, like all this future, right? And you're not worried, you know, like anything's possible. When you're pushing 40 like me, it's like shit, I'm halfway through this game.
I know. I'll be 34 this summer. You know what tripped me out though too was like looking at old characters, and I used to as a kid visualize them as these really like, oh, look how cool they look and interesting, and like the guy in Siphon Filter was like this badass assassin looking dude, right? I played it in the winter and I was like, this dude's just like black blocked pixels. With like
that game, I was just actually playing Siphon Filter 2 last week. The game has not aged as well. Like a lot of I have a nostalgia for that PS1 era.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah, Siphon Filter, I played both of them recently, was not as cool as I remember it being.
Like the tasing was funny and there was like really good moments in it. But like the idea that like when I used to play those things like Road Rash, you know, all the bikers look so unique and tough, but really it's just like blue cutoff shirt, red cutoff shirt.
Yeah.
Jean jacket, no jean jacket. And it's funny how as a kid, you visualize them like it's the toughest, craziest biker you've ever ran into when you're fighting them. But as an adult, you're like, oh, this looks nothing like
what I remember. Well,
like cyberpunk and the
Yes.
detail of these characters as you're walking through. And so I think that's part of good, to go with your point of the nostalgia, to double down, is you remember like how your imagination used to work, and how, like you said, how open your mind
the
was
magic
to the world,
of being a kid.
the magic. And I think not only with age, but with how good gaming's gotten, to where I'm sitting here complaining about $250 military sim shooters. You know what I mean? Like, because that's where we're at, where there's so much content that we can look at all these options and everything. And then it's like, but there's these games that we got to grow up and experience, where it wasn't about, the perfect shot, or the scope fitting a certain way, or like, what does my wand do, or my magical ability, or that mana pot looks stupid. It was just, oh, that Lego looking guy in like horrible pixels on a side scroller is like the coolest Indiana Jones representation I've ever seen. And now I am questing for gold and treasure.
I think it's healthy to, well, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, the mix. I'm making a lot of retro content, but I still play modern games if I think I can make some content out of them, like Alan Wake 2. For you, though, if you're going to keep playing with retro games, and anyone else, I found what I consider the holy grail for early 3D games. Well, the issue with, like, say, Siphon Filter, those games, if you're playing on DuckStation or EPSXE, probably one of those two.
That's it, DuckStation. That's one of the things that got set up.
It's the best PS1. My favorite.
Okay,
shout out to DuckStation.
That's what my buddy said.
If you're not going to use a texture pack, it doesn't have that functionality, but everything else, it's the best. With DuckStation, you have your OSD messages, right? And you can show the screen refresh rate and the frame rate. And you realize that, like, Siphon Filter runs at 18 to 20 frames natively. It's a very low frame rate. It's very clunky.
Yeah.
Now, to play old games at 60 frames a second is hard, because most of these games were programmed where game logic is tied to frame rate. So if you overclock the emulated CPU, which you can do in DuckStation, you can say, pretend that my PS1 CPU is like 1,000 times faster. The game will run fast, but then it breaks all the shit because everything's tied to frame rate. Some games it works, some games it doesn't. Siphon Filter was one that didn't work. And I'm like, man, there's just no consistent way for me to play these old games at 60 frames a second, or even more, because I have a 144 hertz screen now. I want to play them at 120 frames a second. Like, what would that be like? There's a program on Steam for $6 called Lossless Scaling. It's $6. And what it does is, so in DLSS 3.5, like, and with ray construction and frame generation, the NVIDIA tech, it is technically interpolation, but it's not interpolation like remember when those smart TVs came out and they would have like frame interpolation and make everything look like a soap opera and everyone hated it? It's not, under the hood, it's not the same type of interpolation as that. It does something with like reading the frame buffer and generating frames. It's way better than traditional interpolation.
Very cool.
So anyway, on Siphon Filter, I bumped the frame rate by like 10%. So it's running at 30 frames instead of like 20. So the game ran slow, but it runs just a little bit faster. And when you bump the emulated CPU, it doesn't mess with the audio. Like if you were to say, emulate this game at 110% speed, you get the same effect, but now all the audio is at 110% speed and you get like weird high pitched stuff and the audio breaks. So you bump the CPU up a little bit. Yes, it's not enough to break game logic. And then you throw lossless scaling on it, and it interpolates the frames up to 120. And even though it's not like as responsive as a 120 FPS game, it's still as smooth and as clear in motion as a 120 FPS game. And you can do that to any game, any media, lossless scaling. It can also upscale resolution as well, but that's not what I use it for, because all the emulators can do that natively. But you can take literally any game and go take it to essentially whatever frame rate you want. And I would say 95% of them, it works perfectly.
I've got lossless scaling up on my screen right now. That's crazy. That's only $6.
$6.
Yeah,
it is. I have been, because PS1 is what I focus on the most. It's just has the most nostalgia for me. It's my favorite console. The library is huge. Even the North America PS1 library is massive. And if you bring in Japan, there's so many games. And
Well, that blew my mind. I didn't realize that there were different releases back in the day. Like when I was going through the emulator
yeah,
archives, there was a Japan release, a Europe release. Like
yes,
the Wu-Tang game had like 4 different countries that they
yes.
released. It was crazy. I was like, what do you mean? Like it wasn't just like the game that everybody got and it was all the same.
And there's a lot of
Yeah.
games that were only Japan, and there's a handful of games that Europe got over the years that we never got. It just depends. Japan obviously gets a lot of shit back in the day that we wouldn't get. They just didn't feel like it was worth the money to localize and bring over.
And they're probably right.
They probably are right. But speaking of the community, a lot of these older games get fan translations and patches. And so you can like, not only can you go back and play Genesis games, but you can go back and play games that were Japan only in English, the games that you would have never been able to play. But because of preservation and emulation and community, long story short, I've just become like really, I was already passionate about emulation, but now I'm just ultra, because people will get angry about, and there's a whole different argument about piracy and ethics. And I think I've really kind of fleshed out my position on that, and we don't have time for it. I don't think emulation is inherently piracy, especially when it's somewhere between 87 to 95% of all games. There is no commercial path to buy them anymore.
And the fact that like most things that I could plug it that I need to plug it into aren't even available. Like it's just when you consider like where it's gone and what is left behind, like it's kind of an honor that people like us even take the time to still celebrate these things and tell our friends about it, and then have the conversation like, oh shit, this company's still developing games like 20 years later. What did they put out recently? And then you rabbit hole into Steam and start picking up some of the new stuff. Right. So music wise, and thank you again for always supporting.
Oh yes, hit us.
Anything going on with that, just Spotify, Apple, Amazon. I'll regularly have stuff coming out. I'll send you personally some of the ambient stuff I'm doing. But if you like Blade Runner, chill, ambient music, like really good gaming music, I have like 30 records out now since last year that all fit into that niche, and they're great. As a fan of yours and the channel and the community, I have a game recommendation that people might not know that kind of fits with the channel, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Door Kickers 2. Are you familiar with Door Kickers?
I have never heard of this. Let's check it out.
Okay.
Oh, this is like a top down, okay, like loaded. Dude, almost.
It's so much fun. So the basic premise is you're a SWAT team. You pick your fire team out. You place them around the map, and then it's turn-based, where you move your characters around to infiltrate a compound, whether it's to, take down a bank robbery, save an embassy, whatever. It's very like implement democracy, but it's super retro. It brings me back to playing like Nintendo games back in the day, and the community behind it is phenomenal. They have a ton of content in the game itself for how affordable it is, like already, but the modding community makes all these custom maps and experiences, and there's time trialing, and it's really, really fun. And if there's anybody out there that enjoys top-down games or shooter game and just wants a fun, casual, non-PvP experience, worth every single penny that I spent. That's one of those games I would buy a second version of, like you had said before, just to support them.
Yeah, and those who are listening only and not watching the YouTube edit, it is top-down, like Loaded or Hotel Miami, but as he said, it's turn-based. So it's like a top-down, what was that, Smash TV, but it's turn-based like XCOM.
Yeah, XCOM's a perfect way to compare it. Yeah.
And then but the aesthetic is like modern, or not, it's like real world SWAT team guys are like decked out in body armor.
Well, and you customize everything from their optics, suppressors, the armor that they're wearing. There's night missions where you can give them nods, and you get to build each character ahead of time. They save the presets, and then you pick which operative you want to bring in with the fire team. It's really cool.
I'm watching someone play it right now, and it looks like it's not turn-based. Traditionally, it's like everything's on like you pause it and everything's on a cooldown. Is that how
Yeah,
it works?
so you set up in route, you make your routes, you basically trace where your characters are going to go, and then you can set it up to go live. However, when characters hit certain interactions, like they get to a door and they're in their compound, you have to then make the next decision for them. So I guess turn-based wouldn't be the exact correct term because it's
Oh.
not like Hearthstone or something where you're going turn by turn, fight by fight, like Pokemon or whatever, but it moves in a very like linear, like point A to point B, action at point B, followed by point C, action D, and then you go step by step by step by step. Or you can map the whole thing out and just push play and see if you survive.
Yeah, so it reminds me a little bit of for example, would be Dragon Age Inquisition or any of the Dragon Age games where you pause, you issue commands, then you unpause.
Exactly.
And you can pause at any point and like reissue your command. So for those listening, you're top down, you click on a character, you drag, you say, okay, you go here, breach this door, you throw a grenade here, you go there, and then you hit unpause. They carry the actions out, and at any point, if it's going wrong or you want to change your actions. I do see a timer at the bottom. What is that timer?
So that's the time trial perspective. So how long did it take you to complete the op?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then sometimes it's reversed where there's a bomb and you have to defuse it and you have X amount of time to get into the site and figure out how to get there. In celebration though of, retro gaming and your channel and what like our friendship means to me, I wanted to recommend that because when I was a kid, before I had a PC and before I even had a Super Nintendo, my buddy down the street had an old Apple computer, like one of the Macintoshes that had the actual little Apple front.
Yeah.
After school, we'd get off the bus and I'd go over to his house and we'd sit there and go back and forth on the computer with a few old games. I'll try and get the names of the games for the next time we're on the pod, but that door kicker game kind of took me back to that Macintosh era, top down.
That's a common theme that I think I know I had other people brought up is when you're growing up and you have limited resource. We all had that friend that either had the console we didn't have, had the game we didn't have, had the PC we didn't have, and then we associate these positive memories because there was just a limit. Like I never had PCs growing up, but I had a friend, and his dad was a programmer for a local. It's called Word Perfect. I don't know if you knew about Word Perfect when you were in Utah. They turned into Novell, a huge software company, like way back in 80s and 90s, big money. Anyway, so he had like a computer room like you have set up. It's like 5 computers. So going to his house was the shit because all the stuff I couldn't play. And you had that. I had a friend the same thing with the Apple. So a lot of people had those Apples. And this was pre the colored Apple. This is the old like gray with the Apple sticking out on the monitor.
Yeah.
So Headphone Activist, links to all the stuff will be in the podcast description, but Headphone Activist pretty much everywhere, right?
Yeah, wherever you stream and enjoy your content, I'm there. Thank you for the support. Thank you guys for I don't know, every time I finish the podcast, I definitely get some new people who stop in just to say hi and that they're enjoying the music. So thank you to everyone who's done that. And thank you for having me back to talk about like probably the only thing that I'm as passionate about as music, which is video games, because I have so much fun every time just getting to vent and riff and learn something new with you. It's always a blast.
Yeah, so it's always good. We've had a lot of I'm having more and more musical guests on.
That's cool.
I think musicians and producers like video games. Like the overlap is, I would say, like 80 to 90%. Like had that Swarm guy on recently, and he got into video games like 6 years ago, something like that. He didn't play them, but then he dove in head first and he became a hardcore gamer like very, very fast. Something about like if you can sit in front of a screen and make music, something about consuming the art of a game is inspiring for music, right? And so I just find that producers make great guests, even if they didn't grow up hardcore gamers. They still have like gaming is always seems to be a part of their creative process, or at least consumption.
I think so. No, I think so, and I think it all translates, right? It's art being experienced and absorbed and done through the same tools, right? Like the same thing that lets me frag out in a shooter or quest through a cave is what I use to put notes on a song, which is this mouse. Right?
Yeah.
So, shameless endorsement. The Shroud mouse is awesome. I just got this a few months
The streamer has his own mouse?
Yeah, so it's Shroud with Logitech. They might hate that I'm endorsing Shroud, but I'm a fan. He got his own line with Logitech, and he did like mouse pad, keyboard, and mouse. And I got it on a whim just because he had a sale, and it's awesome. It's
awesome.
Like light as a feather. Great for I'm fragging out on all my shooters, no problems.
I mean, if you're playing Tarkov and you like that mouse, then it must work, because you would not put up with a shitty mouse.
No,
you
have to have something decent. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, dude. Well, welcome again, Headphone Activist. Remember, share the good news of the gaming gospel. Check out his music. Links will be in the podcast description. Ye shall be blessed. Say these things in the name of Miyamoto, the Father, Kojima, the Son, and Carmack, the Holy Ghost. Amen. See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.